So our next speaker is actually from ING. He will tell us a bit more about how creating one common story can help our stakeholders getting around one same concept. And the way we speak to each other, what we mean, can help us dealing with complexity in our projects. Diego is our colleague at ING. He was part of ING Neo, our former innovation department. And he has a really different type of experience from startups, non-profits, and consulting agencies. He is a huge fan of system thinking, and that some of us already know, I think. And in life, he has three purposes, and in this order: love, serve, and design. I cannot tell you much more about it, but you will if you have a coffee with him after. So please help me welcoming already here Diego Snayers.
Hello. This is such a special time for me, and also to see all the orange, but also to see all the other colors. It's good to see you here. As Ines mentioned, I'll be moving on further on the hero's journey, and this is really something that I'm also giving back. After ING and the people who're working there have given me so many things: experiences, knowledge, grudges, annoyances, all of these things wrapped up. It was a really great experience. I'll be speaking about the tangledness of the world that we are living in, and also the tangledness of the language that we use to describe it. By education and academics, I'm not a designer. I'm a biokineticist. What is that? That's the person who helps you walk after you perhaps came out of a coma. It's the person who helps you kind of perform better if you're an athlete. And the fun thing about that is, I could use some of the principles later, especially the interconnectedness of the different bodily systems. You think they are disconnected, but they are very much influential on each other. My mom messaged me yesterday saying she will join this talk, which is also quite nice. She's out in South Africa. And I thought, it would be a great time for her to figure out what I'm actually doing with my life and what is service design, and also to see where her money went for the biokinetics degree. Mom, it's working out. What I would like us to experience together. Firstly, I'm resonating here. I'm really feeling quite in touch and in the flow with what the other speakers were talking about. And that's really great of you, the organizers. Very good narrative or dialogue. Things like interconnectedness, things like resonance, things like perspective. I think it will start coming up and you'll see what I've been getting a bit jiggly about. Tingly, that's better. What I would love for you to have experienced when you walk out, or maybe go and see the museum or have some drinks later, is that to know that language and what you are saying and the words you are using can be limited, and it is limited, and we have to accept that. Co-creating meaning very much depends on that language we speak, and can actually enrich design and the work that we do. What I'd like you to kind of picture, or scribble down, or imagine, is as I'm going through these principles, examples, and nice images, how you could use that as a problem dissolver. Maybe to hear, and to hear well, to listen well, that the last thing we need in this complex world is to reflect a complex language. And one of the biggest principles right now in the education of systems thinking is the foundation of mastering complexity language. So a language, whether it be verbal, symbolic, even mathematical, that doesn't reflect the increasing complexity and wickedness and interconnectedness, but describes it in a way that is valuable to you. And finally, if you leave only at least curious, then I think this would have been a great swan song for me. Some of the concepts that we'll be talking about is, I'll start with sense making and how and what the world is, telling us and how we can piece it together. And we'll go all the way through to meaning. And I'll take you along. I'll also show you the halfway markers, in case you're getting bored or wondering when is we getting to the juicy bits. So I'll start with something very close to us, with something that we all share, and that is the fact that we are currently experiencing this world and our reality in two different spaces simultaneously. A bit of an echo? Yeah. First, it's the world of ideas, this internal kind of motion and dynamism where our concepts, our worldviews are getting formed. Some of your ideas kind of generating as you're looking through a brief, perhaps. And the other is the world of experiences. This is, you are actually tactile in this planet, and you are creating and designing and eating and whatever else you do with your body. And this experience here, in one kind of bite, is sense-making. And if you understand this, then you are well on your way to prime yourself for systems thinking, both as a practice and perhaps even if you're keen to study it a bit more. The first barrier was really that reality and your perspective of that. And so in addition to the sense-making loop, and I would like you to just imagine that loop going through this whole presentation, that if we expand a bit more, yes, we spoke about concepts, we spoke about this reality and our experiences, but they are filtered and they are framed and they are colored by a perspective. This is very similar to what Paul spoke about, distance of the perspective and what your eye and what you actually take in as a designer influences and colors your concepts. You use that, whether consciously or not, to make certain decisions, and this is where behavioral scientists would love this part. And based on those decisions, you act on this world and you bring out what you need to bring out, and you hope that your stakeholders are going to like it. And language fits in at every step that that kind of information and experience takes from this reality through you, through your actions, back into the world. For organizations, it's exactly the same. Organization is just us, a group of people, got together with some kind of goal, mostly to make money, and that's the perspective we have. Our quarterly reports, cost-to-income ratio, yeah, I see you thinking already, cost-benefit analysis, total addressable market, things like this. And these concepts and models and ways of thinking are building themselves up as a collective, organizationally. We then move to decision-making, which is way more complicated than you making a decision, unless it's maybe about who you want to get married to or what you want to spend your money on. And so we act on this reality of the world with new products, maybe pulling a product, entering a new market, or changing perhaps an onboarding journey. I promised we are now 2 of 5 steps into the journey. The next thing we'd like to cross is perspective and language. I hope you know Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson. For those of you who don't know it, this is some books that were written in England, I think, UK, Britain, whatever. And this is about a very good detective and his very clinical friend. And they go about solving mysteries, mostly murders and thefts. And they took a break. They're like, okay, we're tired of going to homicide sites. Let's get a bit away. They are out having a nice whiskey by the fire, talking and regaling their own tales. Gets a bit late. They're tired, and they go to cuddle up and have a nap. You know, much later into the evening, beautiful evening, by the way, Watson wakes up with a gasp, like, oh, shit. And he says, doof, he nudges Holmes. And Holmes wakes up, still kind of smelling like whiskey himself. He's like, what? Watson says, Holmes, look up. What do you see? And Holmes is like, okay. Astronomically, I see that there are hundreds of thousands of stars, that this universe might actually be infinite. it makes me feel very small. Astrologically, I can see that Venus is in Leo position. Meteorologically, it's going to be a good day tomorrow. There's no clouds in the air. Horologically, probably it's about 4:30 a.m. Why, dude? What do you see? And Watson replies, Sherlock, you idiot. Somebody has stolen our tent. The interesting thing about that is both perspectives are equally valid. And if I were to kind of categorize them, Holmes was using deductive logic. Actually, it's not deductive. I just want to fix that because all the books say so and all the people say so. He's actually using inductive logic. You can look that up later. I just want to make that right to the world. The reality, according to a very categorical kind of thinker, very analytical, very inductive logician, was to look for very specifics and see what that means to them, analyze a situation, and perhaps take a decision which is quite egocentric, not in the selfish way, but in the perspective of it, and react to that situation. On the other side, Watson, who sees the whole, who has zoomed out, has tried to find what all these connections mean to him, aligned it to maybe some themes that he knows about, burglary, theft, tent, and has made a bit of a more ecocentric decision on what was going on. And that could lead him, the previous slide said the action was reaction, which is what happens when in the short term, for example, companies would pull something because it's not making enough money over this time, but if they gave it a bit more time, it would change. As opposed to Holmes, Watson, who would do something more generative and see why are tents getting stolen. So some key points, you don't have to read through everything, but what you need to kind of take with you in your pocket is that both us as individuals, groups, and bigger collectives really want to make sense of the world, and you are, even though you might not be doing it consciously, and we use certain language to describe it. What we see is what we have experienced and kind of trained ourselves to see, and a lot of the time, and most of the time, that language doesn't describe this reality very well. And when we use fragmented or categorical language, which actually works very well for the scientific method, great for that, we inherently stand the risk of creating fragmented experiences, fragmented products, and fragmented things. Two more to go. Let's go back. So what I'm trying to get at here, actually, guys, and just if you could open your hearts and your ears to this, is really to leverage agile frameworks, to provide a robust synopsis for the high-level systems overviews and create iterative approaches to our corporate strategies, fostering collaborative thinking in order to get to a bigger value proposition and grow organically a holistic worldview through diversity of people and diversity of thinking with win-win survival strategies, because Generation X has left us with a legacy. Despina, do you know what I mean? Yes? You don't? Yeah, me neither. I don't have any idea what I just said. And I found this lovely tool which said something that I always thought. This tool generates bullshit. Buzzwords, and it strings together things, and you could probably get an interview and pass that interview using this. And why I bring this up is because we've created not only a culture in which we're experiencing and work, but we've created a language which we actually incentivize people. Right now, agile means 100 different things to 100 different people, and the implementation of that even more so. And this is where I urge you, and I tickle you in a good way, in a non-harassing way, and I poke you to try to step over or break through this barrier between language and understanding. Why could it be so complex? I give you a little insight into language studies. I'm not going to do linguistics with you. There's a whole world of that, and I'm not really qualified for that. But I'm a person, and I use words, so this qualifies me to do this slide. We have certain words that have a different level of, I don't know, stickiness in the gooey kind of way. We have real objects in the world. There's a sticky note. Initially, my example is a leopard, but I'm trying to fit in. As a sticky note, in reality, it exists. It's a tangible object. In our perspective, we have tangible characteristics for it. Yellow, square, paper. And our concepts around it, we think sticky. It sticks. It looks like this. Then we get to words which have slightly more space for an interpretation. They have very similar kind of perspectives and tangible points around them, which is for a customer journey experience, touch points, pains, jobs to be done, do a gap analysis, emotions. But depending on who's looking and who's describing that customer journey experience, it could be a subjective story to a user researcher or ethnographic researcher. It could be for innovation strategists, our favorite people with all the canvases, could be journey mapping session. For the IT lead or the guys looking after the feasibility, he would at the end see a requirements list more than that experience. And our most favorite word. Now, this is the highest level of vague that you can get. Why? Because reality in innovation is really, I can't really touch it. I can see some of the effects on it. I can see where there was creative thinking. But from a perspective point of view, whether you're a small agency, a big corporate, whether you are a client who wants to do change, what does even innovation look like at different points? Is it automating a paper-based process in the back office? Is it completely disrupting the market? Is it creating a unicorn? I don't know. And this is kind of the state that we are living in, that we've actually created. And I think it's our responsibility to remedy this. I'll take you through a bit of a use case. Not a bit, it is a use case. And this is what I was involved in, and I actually used this. I took a chance here. I wasn't really allowed to spend time on this, but I did it anyway because I was really tired of the way we were doing things in general. So we wanted to help solve for the housing crisis in Amsterdam, and just like other big cities, it's really difficult to find a house. Our challenge context, if I reduce it to just very clear points, was buyers want houses, realtors want to sell them, banks want to get leads and convert that kind of desires into mortgages, which is really a great product for a bank, by the way. When we did our kind of qualitative research, very clearly what's coming up out of our interviews, coming out of our surveys, is that, like I mentioned, buyers can't get access to the realtor, and thus they can't get viewings, which they want to get to because they're going to spend hundreds and thousands of euros. They also have to, if you look at the bottom of the red circle, the sticky there, they have to rely very much on this actor, the realtor, for information and guidance. When I change it around and look at the perspective, our perspective of the realtor, is that basically they need more time. They want to reduce the amount of time they spend on admin. Even if they have people working with them in the office, this is still quite an issue for them. And this has helped us to gain some understanding and took us just one step further to generate and have this kind of common meeting emerge. And this is where we wanted to step over. There are 3 systems tools that I will speak through quite briefly. Hopefully they give you an idea of what they can do and mean. And for us to get, firstly, a common meaning, we use a very simple tool called system identities. And it's a way of looking at an organization or an actor as a transformation. Why is that? Just like a business, we input into ourselves certain information, maybe even desires or environmental factors, and we transform that into our output or an action. And that output or action is for something else or someone else, perhaps even for ourselves. And so you don't have to remember the labels around it, but what I would like for you to take from this is that you are a transformer in yourself as a user or an actor, and so is a big bank, so is government. There's always something coming in, transformed under context of these guys into an output. We did this kind of mapping for Realtor. It's quite a logical, commonsensical activity, but what emerges from doing this is what the interesting part was for me, and also for me testing it without them knowing. Take note of the shape of this, because that was actually the most, or one of the most important insights there. The first insight was to get to the core or essential activity of the realtor, which was a transformation of hints, inquiries, mails, and calls. He had to kind of convert this into proposals to the client and giving leads to the bank. Ultimately, he had to convert this into successful sales and get money. From that transformation and from that picture, we could write an essential story. Very similar to a user story, but there is no but. So as a user, I want to, but this one takes a bit of a different twist on it. And by looking at that kind of diagram, you can literally write the essential story and activities that this realtor has to go through. The real power in this is reading that story together and realizing that you had seen this person or this group of people in a very different way. So in the shape again, what we realized here was that the realtor has the most amount of activities to produce. Guidance, proposals, he's got to conduct certain research, he's got to come up with an advice both for his client 1 and client 2, and he's probably working with a mortgage advisor, so he needs to get leads. There might be a commission there. When we look at the buyers, I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but it's exactly the same activity for the buyer. We found that they have the most customers. They have the most people to appease and please. One of them is themselves. This is a big decision. They have to convince their partners, perhaps their families. They have to convince the realtor that I'm good enough to come and see you, and the bank, because they need money to buy this $1 million euro house. And this is where we're going to step off this bridge now and see what this actually meant for us, and how this kind of enriched our design and also our ideas. From all of this information, the essential story, the transformation, very categorically, we put together our hypothesis, just very simply in a loop, saying potential buyers bring a lot of admin. This admin leads to less viewings and less sales. This is about time. And immediately, minds went to, okay, admin is such a pain in the ass, automate it. And this was kind of the excitement about it. And we started doing research and do competition scanning and, what would it take for us to actually integrate or build all these lovely categorical things. And I introduced a second tool, or second method, called causal loop. And this is a diagramming technique which can help you kind of visualize your hypothesis. So just as we were quite categorical in what that looked like, we wanted to see what does it mean, what is the dynamism, what is the movement of this hypothesis. And, the key thing to look for here is to look for the size of the balloons. You can see it as balloons or growing and being in relation to each other. If one circle becomes bigger, it could create a bigger balloon on the other side. And so what we were kind of visualizing here is that if admin is linked to viewings, sales, and buyers, then what would the effect of automation be on that admin? We ran a simulation. And as you see this kind of action going around, you see sales is increasing minimally, and admin is also, and they're kind of oscillating there. to get them to pull in and to kind of tempt these categorical thinkers I was working with. I was like, yeah, there's also numbers, you know. And I used a mathematical modeling tool to take that causal loop, very simple, and to run it in a modeling tool. Why? Because I wanted to see what are the numbers behind this. Immediately, what came up, and business people love graphs. Please draw a graph. You get way more attention and way more credibility way faster, and then you are in the conversation. So we saw that, yeah, automation, we can build something new. It's going to kind of increase the amount of sales, but it will stagnate from there. But this was the golden nugget. Realtors' time capacities, because they live in our world and they are human beings, they have 8 to 10 hours to do viewings and sell houses, period. We cannot give them more time. We can make time more efficient, their activities for that. But how about we try to do that in another way? And so what we came up with was, if the buyers need to convince so much, can't we help them make a better case? And so how can we prepare the buyers to get to the realtor, to know what they want very quickly, to have a werkgeversverklaring, which is a document you need from your company that says, we back you, and you are getting money every month. And perhaps in addition to automation, we could find some kind of intervention. And we ran the model again. So with minimal automation, with increasing the preparedness of the buyer by, let's say, 2 factors, and by 2 factors I mean get them the right documents at the right time, or automate that little process, we saw that sales bubble grew very nice. And people got very, they found it lekker to see it move. There's a South African word for it. It's also ek kry lekker, like you're getting goodness out of it. And I could write it out. I could also give a very nice categorical report. But although this is a scientific tool, just bringing that visual element, the dynamism, that movement in it, just like with a sense-making movement, you can communicate something a bit more meaningful. I'm quite near the end now. This went faster than I thought. Amazing. And the key points that I would like for you, you can decide for yourself what you want to take home, is that you can actually kind of map and kind of integrate definitions of the systems that you see. And it need not be complicated. A system is simply a set of interconnected elements. They have their own purpose, but together they create a bigger purpose. Seat, gear, wheel, handle, that's a bike. But there's also the bike that you are moving with, the bike that you are mobile on. Either one of them has their own purpose. A gear is a gear and will always be a gear, but together with other interconnections, it creates something bigger. Also, in addition to interconnectedness, is the fact that these elements which are interconnected affect each other. And that's the basis of systems thinking. Secondly, that a shared language and kind of describing your reality as the designer, as the researcher, as the product developer can continue for you to reveal insights, not just by yourself, but generate something that emerges from many people's minds and experiences. And that you can describe your challenge in such a way that you can identify those key kind of integral components or variables which influence your problematic situation. I don't think we are dealing with problems anymore, and perhaps the problem is not the problem. Perhaps there's a space, there's a situation around these things, these elements that create it. And we can dissolve that, guys. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Diego. Maybe before we move to the next slide, nice sentence that you're sharing here with us. What does that mean to you? Maybe it's a nice way to start our Q&A.
There's something quite poetic about the work that we do. I'm sure you felt it. We also have our kind of weird, maybe not weird, but our our sites where we are reading different things or interested in different things, which kind of feeds into our design work. And also I believe that this kind of bigger perspective, the systems thinking, is quite poetic as well. There's layers of meaning to it. There's things which emerge also from reading a poem and also making a diagram. And this Rumi is one of the Persian poets, and he says that one heart is better than one language, but in Farsi you can switch heart for empathy. And at the risk of negating everything I've just said, if there's no empathy, aside from the soft ideas of what empathy is, if there's no real empathy, then the common language would mean nothing to you as well. So get your heart, get your head straight.
Nice, nice. Inspiring. Nice. Some applause, it's okay. I guess as designers, we are used to also navigate this empathic, empathy world when we are designing. So we have some questions already here, but before we go to the questions, we had one comment. So most of us have parents that don't know what we're doing. I myself, I think, included. But Mum, it's working out. It's one of the best lines of the event so far. So I hope your mum is listening and it's working out.
Good.
So one other question for you. So how did you gather all the knowledge of this topic and how did you get skilled in it?
I fell down a bit of a rabbit hole of, I think it was a BuzzFeed article. And as I was continuing, a lot of these topics were resonating with me. And I always wanted to understand also, how do I prove the impact of design? This is a question which goes back probably before I started, but it was really annoying me. And I was really trying to look for a language that I could speak like this. How I gathered the knowledge, reading first of all, but there is a kind of a postgrad or advanced course that is developed through Franklin University in Switzerland. It's called Design Dissolve, and it's probably your best gateway drug into this space. Other than that, it's the practice of those tools, and that's how I gathered my knowledge also. So find ways to sneak in these kind of
nice. And you showed some tools. Can you name the name of some of the tools?
Yeah, one of them is literally called naming systems.
Naming systems. Okay.
Yes, and that's quite an old organizational planning tool. I don't think I should go into that now.
No, it's
but you can kind of read up on that. It's also sometimes called VPlan, which is VIPLAN. The second tool I used was causal loop diagrams. Look it up, very interesting. And just play around with it a bit. You'll see that some of the content you won't understand, and those are the things that you can go and look for a mentor for, a community for, or join the Design Dissolve course.
Nice. All right, thank you. And would a shared language for a team also help developing a customer-facing language, so a tone of voice?
Of course. Could that be an answer to this question?
Yeah, it's of course.
Of course. It would be, I do believe that it is quite a trigger for psychosis if the shared language or the language in your head is not what you are speaking outside, because then the difference between what you say and what you do becomes apparent, and that is a lack of integrity. So, to answer your question, yes, and also check yourself before you wreck yourself. Yeah.
All right. Now it's maybe perhaps a big question, but it's nice to hear your thoughts on it. What's the difference between system thinking and design thinking?
Oh, goodness gracious. That's the nicest way, politically correct way I can respond to that. Firstly, I find it funny to get this question sometimes because, you can put anything in front of the word thinking and it would kind of make sense, you know, engineering thinking, mathematical thinking, bird-like thinking. So I'm going to go past that layer of the question and say that design thinking was, at least how I understand it, some way to reduce what we are doing in our careers, which is looking wide and coming back. Looking wide and coming back and trying to gain an insight through that. And I think that systems thinking kind of can just hug that, encapsulate it, take it on a date and say, hey, while you are expanding and contracting, diverging and converging, sorry, how about we converge and also look at other convergences? Well, what's happening here?
Yeah.
And yeah, I think they are different, just maybe in terms of perspective, but they are the same because it's a way of thinking.
Right. And when looking at the tools you showed, how did they help you communicating with your team, these results that you reached?
Sorry, I'm reading a different question.
That's not the one.
Okay, I'll look at something else. Could you repeat it then? I'm confused.
No worries. So I was saying that so you showed a lot of tools you use, so the system thinking tools, and my question was, how did that help communicating the results that you reached to your team, for example?
It helped me gain firstly credibility.
Okay.
When kind of very entrepreneurial, very categorical business people who have been in the business for long make a decision, they're running forward full speed. So automation software was like, yeehaw, let's go, let's do this. And until I showed them what that meant for them, not in the words only that I was using, but on paper, in a visual, on a diagram, then they were like, oh, okay, cool, get into the convo. And that's where it started helping. That project actually pivoted towards matching realtors and buyers. I'm not sure where it is right now. I left a bit earlier.
But it went somewhere after.
It changed. It changed.
Right. And now to the question on the screen. Systems are a great way of making sure you have a well-rounded solution. Systems, however, can also be very vague and hard to understand. How do you find that balance?
Scoping.
Scoping.
Yeah. A system is vague because you'd probably only be focusing on one part of it. How far you want to go is up to you. The further out you go, the more you'll have to deal with a lot of information, a lot of different connections, and that can become vague. Either that or you are identifying these elements in a bit of a weird way. Scope.
All right. And one last question.
Sure.
Most often a system exists and everything in it already has a name and a story and a meaning. Any tips on how do we rename the confusing parts and make sure everyone is happy with the rename?
Systems evolve and change, and I think it was Constantine's talk in the beginning, one of the kind of characteristics of a system is to be resilient. Think of the economic system right now. It will continue to try to capitalize on certain things, so it's very resilient. And depending on were you looking at it in the past or do you want to look at it in the future, you can do the activity of mapping it again from a different perspective and checking. Because what's wrong with a system in place that produces something that is good?
Mm-hmm. All right.
I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, well, for sure, I think you can talk about system thinking a lot, right? So I'm sure that everyone that is interested knows you and will come to you to ask a little bit more about it.
Cool, I feel very popular. Thank you.
Yes, well, now we all know you. Thank you so much, Diego. A round of applause for Diego.
Thank you.